Chapter 18. I was making slow progress. Math, physics, and chemistry were hard. I was behind a couple of years, and the formulas seemed to have gotten longer since I'd last studied them. The teacher was lecturing on calculus and matrix, while I was still struggling to catch up on a geometric equations. I attended the classes. The teacher and the good students treated me as if I didn't exist. Each time I raised my hand, there was an uncomfortable hush in the room. Another stupid question. My math teacher would roll his eyes and reluctantly give me the chance to ask my question. Then he would ask his protege, the head, to answer it. The head was the nickname we gave the class president, who had a huge, shiny forehead. He was also the school's Communist Youth League president. He was the kind of guy who made exaggerated speeches in public meetings and shouted slogans like parading on National Day. He walked with a stiff neck and a pair of duck feet. He looked at other lowly classmates with disdain and was considered the biggest snob on campus. He was doing fine among other equally snobbish high flyers until the day he was caught writing a love letter to a girl in class. Now he was in another league, a womanizer and a snob. When the head was done, the teacher applauded slowly, nodding and smiling. Another superb performance by his young talent. The teacher himself was distantly cool. He openly avoided talking to me, such a lowly student. Once was enough, but again and again, I quickly lost interest in his class. My mind wandered off on dangerous paths. Ideas flitted around inside my head about how best to torture such an evil being. It would have been fitting to have him and his protege tied up, buck naked, to the old pine tree at the school entrance and let them beg for mercy at the chilly sea wind nipped at their skin. I hated them and I hated myself. One day I went down to our storage room, which was decorated with spider webs and housed hundreds of unknown lethal crawling creatures. Flashlight in hand, I kicked and fumbled among legless, armless pieces of furniture. It was my cave. There were treasures to explore. I had Grandpa's old gambling lamp in my mind. It was a huge, infamous object that with ornate bronze designs and had been given to him by his gambling buddy to prevent cheating in the dark. It was put in storage because of its gigantic appetite. It burned a whole bottle of oil at night, and its smoke stained the white mosquito nets black. I flashed the light around the dark room. In the corner, my old girlfriend glistened like a beacon at sea. As I stepped over cautiously, my big toe caught a round thing that rolled until it hit the wall with a healthy clank. I turned the light onto it, and there, standing on its bottom, was an aged, elegant pot shaped like a short, flat pumpkin. It was Grandpa's liquor jar. He used it to sit on his lap and sleep by his pillow. He sipped blissfully from it when it was full and whistled into it when it was empty. It was his other child, the child Grandma didn't have any part of bearing, nor was it one she approved of. I scooped up both of Grandpa's legacies and dodged my way out without running into many of the webs guarding the room. "What are you doing with those things?" Mom asked. She said she had been standing by the door waiting for me. "Well, I decided to study by myself in my room in the evenings, so I needed a good lamp for light and a teapot." I clutched my treasures. Anything for my studies, Mom would have objected, but she didn't. She knew my ways of tackling a problem. If I danced around something long enough, I would eventually give it my total attention. Mom was a little goddess that the big God had sent into our lives. She understood my vices and tried to forgive me as much as her limited powers allowed her. That night after dinner, I officially locked my door, lit my big lamp, and filled up the old jar with dark, steaming tea. I made sure a night pot stood by, prepared to take a larger than usual output. I was ready to burn. But as I picked up physics, I thought about chemistry. When I leafed through chemistry, the math book screamed for my attention. I fought the temptation of the Green English book, which by now had become my favorite. And there were books on history, geology, physiology, moaning and groaning at the bottom of the pile like stepchildren. Only Chinese history was a given. My midterm results in that subject put me legitimately at the top of my class. I juggled all the books like parts on an assembly line, finally dropping them and resting my head in the cradle of my hands. Finally, I settled for my English book. I was showing decent progress, I was told. There were the usual vocabulary, grammar, drills, tests, and conversations. These simple conversations were good, but thought-provoking. I often wondered why Englishmen greeted each other with other little phrases like good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Simply good everything. If I walked around the dirt street of Yellowstone and greeted people with the good formula, they would think I was crazy. Some might even knock my teeth out and ban me from the town forever. Those folks were content asking each other, have you had breakfast or lunch or dinner yet? After all, nothing was good about a day till your stomach was filled. I was awakened by Mom's knock on the door. It was 5 a.m, and I was in my bed, my English book still on my desk. The lamp had used up the whole bottle of oil. The teapot was empty. I had no recollection of undressing myself or putting the light out. How did I go to sleep last night? I asked Mom, whose face was now inside my door. Dad saw your lights still on at 2 and found you asleep with your face on the book. I must have drifted off. No more irregular hours like that. You are going to ruin your health. But Mom, I need to study longer hours to catch up. You won't catch up that way. You need to have a good, healthy schedule. Such intense conversations made my head throb. I slipped under the warm quilt and had another 15 minutes in bed before I kicked off the blanket and splashed my face with icy water from the river. One afternoon, as I was on my way to Professor Wee's house, the rain began to penetrate the thick foliage that covered the narrow road. It was so loud and urgent it sounded as if a machine gun were spraying the leaves with bullets. It saved me the trouble of bending down into the river to wet my hair. I combed my mop with my hands, and as I saw thick clouds gathering on the western horizon. A storm was coming. I skidded along the wet road and was happy to finally arrive at Professor Wei's house. It was left open. As I ran upstairs, I could hear her voice coming from the second-floor window. She waved to me. I smiled back. Not surprisingly, the dog was standing in the rain, greeting me with his mean, dark glare. He dug up his back feet firmly into the ground, as if warming up to attack me. He gave a throaty rumble, a weak threat that I had gotten used to, and blocked my way. There was something different in his eyes that day, a knowing look. I checked the second-floor window for help. Professor Wei was gone. It was just me and the dog, and he had the upper hand. I wished I had a rifle. The spot between his eyes looked very tempting. He sniffed my thoughts and shook his head in defiance. Water splashed all over me. I shook my own head. Not as much water. The cunning animal was enjoying seeing me get drenched by the storm. He wanted to see me chilled, sneezing, then on the floor begging for mercy, at which time he would walk over and sink his teeth into a juicy part of me. A dinner in the rain was better than no dinner at all. Sudden lightning cleaved the dark sky, followed immediately by deafening thunder no more than a half a mile away. The loud sound brought me to my knees. I closed my eyes and plugged my ears with my thumbs, waiting for the imminent attack for both the thunder and the dog, but nothing happened. The thunder trailed down to I'll have to stop it right there. Okay, sorry guys, I got it now. The thunder trailed down to spasmodic firecracker mutterings and vanished. I opened my eyes and saw the dog crawling in the mud toward his house, his tail tucked between his legs. At that moment, I lost all respect for the animal and wanted to shoot myself for having put up with his cruel, unfair treatment. Professor Wee greeted me with a dry towel as I sauntered toward the door like a real man for the first time, fearless and dignified. I could feel the weak look in the dog's eyes now that he had been brought to his knees by the thunder. I had withstood the uproar. I took the towel and gave my head a good drying. Professor Wee found me a T-shirt, and I was once again comfortable. But no feeling surpassed the sweetness of whining. That dog was forever crossed off my fear list. He was, after all, a man's world out there, pal. You look happy today, Professor Wee said, rather surprised. Thank you. I'm happy to be here, I said in English. Maybe you know something already, she said in Chinese. What do you mean? Well, I heard from my friend in Peking that for the next college examination, if you choose English as your major, you don't have to take tests in science or math at all. Is that right? I pinched my thigh, almost jumping out of the seat. I tried to imagine life without math, chemistry, and physics. It would be like a honeymoon forever. I felt like standing up and singing. Oh, but why? Well, the government lacks English majors in all the major universities. I think you should shoot for a college in, say, Beijing. Beijing? Only the best went there. Yes, ma'am, whatever you say. You think I'm going to be that good? You will be if you work hard. You have shown tremendous progress. Really? I am going to cram you until you are full. Cram me, please. I never felt emptier. Here we go. Here you go. She pulled out a bag full of books and printed materials. These are the exercises and all the English vocabulary that you need to know to pass the test. She patted the stack like an insurance man talking about a rainy day. I rushed over and touched the pile with a shaky hand. This would be my salvation. The news about the college examinations worried my parents a great deal. It meant that I would give up science courses. Was it premature? The government was changeable on policies like that. This was a country that had changed the Constitution more often than its meals. There was intense conversation between my parents. I felt it necessary to drop in the keywords. With this policy, I might be able to apply to study English in college in Beijing. It was a showstopper. There were silence. They looked at me with doubt. But Dad thought about it for a second, then nodded with approval. I liked the sound of it. He was a man who had made me the first violin player in the history of Yellowstone, however bad I was. And he was ready for me to major in English and to send me off to Beijing. He would share every bit of my progress over tea with his many friends for the rest of his life. Dad was the dreamer. Mom was the practical reinforcer who knocked on the door at 5 every morning to wake me up and shake the mosquito net, making sure I didn't take too long a nap between studies or waste time daydreaming. Wouldn't that be a little too fancy and exotic for us? Mom asked. You bet it would. Think mud, think manure, think digging the hills. That would be more appropriate for us. But I wanted to be special.